Would you please pray with me? O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Take my lips and speak with them. Take our minds and think with them. Take our hearts and set them on fire. Amen. The Gospel of Mark is the only book in the Bible that has 3 endings to it. The shortest version is the ending we just read. It ends at Mark 16:8. But there are 2 others that expand on this. We've got the earliest text we found in the Gospel of Mark just ended verse 8, but they found other versions that go into more detail about what happens after the resurrection. But as we're reading this first one, it strikes me as a very interesting ending to the Gospel. Because the Gospel ends up with that phrase, they were afraid. And in fact, it kind of leaves us wondering, because as Christians, Easter is this day we celebrate. It's the high point of the year. It's a cause of much joy. We're shouting our hallelujahs. And yet their response is not one of joy at learning about Christ's resurrection. It's one of fear. The translation we read today, in fact, uses the terror and dread. So I wanted us to look at, so why do you think these women, when confronted with what should be this joyous event, respond the way they do? So I have a few theories. These are not extensively researched and vetted by theologians all around the world sort of theories. This is just what Pastor Jeff came up with as I was reading the text and looking at stuff. So don't necessarily cite me as the expert. But one idea, of course, is just the reality that if you came to a tomb and you're expecting a dead body and a dead body is not there, that might be a little unsettling. Because we kind of know how dead bodies work. They're kind of supposed to stay where we leave them. So maybe it was just that kind of response of what in the world's going on? There could have also been some fear from the women because maybe they were worried that the Romans had gone and done something worse with Christ. The crucifixion was a horrible and humiliating death, but mutilating corpses and using dead bodies for sort of propaganda was not uncommon. So maybe their fear was, oh my gosh, it's gotten even worse. What greater shame is going to come? What worse is happening because of this? But if we look at the story, the women's response of fear comes at the end after they've talked to the angel, after they've heard that Christ is in fact risen, that Christ is going ahead of them to Galilee, and they're supposed to follow after. And then they leave afraid. The fear actually seems to come from the fact that Christ is risen. Well, what's so scary about the resurrection? Well, one thing may just be that death provides some finality, some certainty. I'm sure that they were been struggling for the last 2 days with their grief over this man they've been followed and they loved and they cared for. They're struggling with that grief, and maybe they've been starting to cope with it and come to terms with it and just get over it, and all of a sudden they're like, oh wait, never mind. That could throw them off. That might leave them a little unsettled and uncertain about what's really going on and sort of into some emotional upheaval. It may have been that they were kind of unsettled by Christ's entire last week. I mean, starting with Palm Sunday, where Christ enters triumphantly into Jerusalem, much in the same way that a ruler might, and then he goes in and he throws up the tables and casts out the money changers from the temple and starts upsetting everybody. I mean, they've been following this guy that was a miracle worker and a great teacher and kind of low-key, and all of a sudden he sounds more like a revolutionary. Maybe they were a little unsettled by what was going on. And after all, all this culminated in Christ being crucified, and they may be thinking, we didn't really know that following him meant this. I mean, he said you got to prepare to lose your life and all this sort of stuff, but we didn't know he really meant it. Maybe it was just sinking in for them how real Christ's teachings were. And this idea that something more was asked of them might be a bit much. And maybe they were just tired. Emotionally drained. They'd been following him for years. And they were ready to be done. They were ready to stop. What do we have to be afraid of in this story? Why might we be afraid? is a sign of the resurrection. One of the things might be unsettling is that miracles often go against our understanding of the world. In fact, that's what makes them miracles. They're inexplicable. They go against what we know to be true. And that's upsetting. It challenges our understandings of the world. We know that when someone is dead, they're dead. They don't come back. The idea that death might not be this certainty we have can be more than a little unsettling. After all, that leaves us with one certainty in life. If death isn't certain anymore, what else is? Taxes. Do we really want taxes to be the only certainty in our life? And so we end up left wondering, what's next? But another reason it might be unsettling is it's actually easier to worship a dead God than a living God. Because a dead God is somebody you can put into place, you can contain, you can trap, you can coordinate. But a living God is out there and moving and breathing and speaking and challenging and pushing. If Christ is dead, you don't have to wait for the next great teaching to further challenge you. You've already gotten it all. It's over. It's done with. We can just understand it and contain it. We know where to go to worship God. God will be at that tomb that we buried him in. We're all done. But a living God that's out and moving and challenging means that our work isn't done. That our faith isn't complete. That there's more yet for us to do. And that can be unsettling. But this story isn't really about fear. Fear may be our initial response. It may be the first thing that we react with. But it's not meant to be the last thing. Because the story doesn't end with death. It ends with new life. And the story doesn't even end with fear, because even though Mark doesn't say it in this shorter version, we know what happens next. The women do tell the story. It gets out beyond them. They come to grips with their fear and start to share and start to tell. And the movement goes on. The story is really about love and hope. The love of God for the world and the hope that we have that even this most terrifying thing, death, is not so terrifying when God is with us. We have something to give us hope. So the question I have is, are we ready to start telling the story? Are we ready to come to grips with our fears about what Christ's resurrection means for us? And are we ready to tell other people about it? Just as the women have to come to terms with their fear and their anxiety about what a life of faith is like, we need to come to grips for ourselves about what it means to follow a living and risen God. A God who is still speaking, a God who is still working, a God who is still pushing and challenging us. Who's moving on to the next thing and saying, we're off to Galilee next. Are you with me? Are we ready to follow a God that's moving on to the next thing and not sitting in the last thing that we did? That's the challenge. Sometimes it's easy in the church to want to sit back and say, okay, Easter is done. We can relax. We can take it easy for a few more months till we start planning Christmas again. Just keep celebrating the past. The reality is, Christ is alive, Christ is risen, and Christ is moving on. We are called as Christians to follow Christ. Christ challenges Peter and the disciples to go with him to Galilee, and Christ challenges us to go out into the world. Because our work is not done. One of my mentors, as I was coming into the ministry, always asked the question, when we think about our faith, we have to ask two parts. What are we saved from? And what are we saved for? Too often, I think we reduce the Christian faith to one or the other. We want to talk about how it's all about sin, and Christ's death on the cross frees us from our sin. Well, that's what we're saved from. Or we want to talk about what we're saved for. We're going to do this good work in the world. Our faith is about both. It's about the fact that Christ died for our sins to offer us that grace. And it's about the fact that Christ rose to challenge us to lead a new life. To be different because of what we believe. To be saved for something. If we look out in the world right now, we see a world that needs resurrection. We see a world that needs not terror and fear and dread, but new hope and new life. Just look at our plants right now. We had this nice start to the spring, and that's been kind of cool, and we haven't really gotten any rain, and you look around, and all around you see dead stuff. Aren't we ready for some green? Aren't we ready for some grass and some buds and some flowers? We need new life in the world. But we need resurrection in our lives too. All of us have some dead spots. Some places that are brown. Some places that have been let fallow. That we need resurrection in. We need new life in our lives. We need new life in our communities. We know other people who are hurting, who are dying, spiritually, physically, whatever, who need that hope of a resurrection in their lives. And we can see all around the world, we can see signs of a need for a resurrection. Places torn apart with poverty, with war, with famine. We live in a world that needs that resurrection that God is offering. So what are we still afraid of? What are we still afraid of? The tomb is empty. Christ has left the building. Are we ready to follow Christ into the world? Are we ready to come to grips with those things that hold us back, those things that keep us from believing in what God can do? And are we ready instead to follow God, not knowing what's next, not being certain of the future, but trusting that God is with us, that God's love can overcome even death itself, and that God is offering us a new life? Are we ready to follow a risen and a living Lord? Amen.